Trump's arbitrariness, the story of the dollar, and how America became the world's boss at any hour of the night if some major decision is made anywhere in the world. Tariffs go up somewhere, sanctions are imposed somewhere, the threat to oil supply rises somewhere, the sound of war begins somewhere. Its impact does not remain limited to just that country. Within hours, stock markets shake, currencies tremble, oil moves up and down, and governments around the world sit down with their calculators. The frightening part is that, very often, one country lies at the center of those decisions, America. And this is where the curiosity begins. What is it, exactly, that makes a president sitting in the White House, whether it is Donald Trump or someone else, speed up the heartbeat of the entire world economy? The answer is not hidden only in missiles, the military, or technology. Its real root lies in a piece of paper on which is written dollar. Today, in his second term, Donald Trump is once again standing before the world in the same style, full of warning, pressure, deal-making, and the message of unilateral action. In April 2nd, 2025, his administration built a broad structure of import duties in the name of reciprocal tariffs, and the White House linked it to national security and the trade deficit. This is exactly the style that reminded the world once again that America is not just a country, but has also made itself the referee of the global system. And many times the player is the same, and the umpire is the same too. But Trump's arbitrariness did not appear out of thin air. Behind it lies the story of centuries that turned America from a colony into a superpower, and the dollar from a currency into a tool of global command. This story does not begin with a modern skyscraper, but with mud, disease, hunger, and uncertainty. In 1607, Jamestown became the first permanent English settlement in North America. Then, slowly, the British colonies along the Atlantic coast kept expanding, and those same 13 colonies later became the foundation of America. The America of that time was nothing like the America of today. It was a land where new settlers were struggling simply to survive. They had no institutions, no strong banking system, and not even a uniformly accepted money. In other words, the country that later captured the world's currency system began with monetary confusion. Many of the people who came from Europe reached this new world in search of a better life, land, trade, and sometimes relief from religious conflicts. They brought coins with them, but coins do not always last. Supply was limited, settlements were scattered, and no regular minting system existed. So the question of exchange arose. In some places, goods were exchanged for goods, in some places local products were used, and in some places, shell-based exchange worked. In New England, shell beads called wampum became so important that in 1637 Massachusetts accepted them like legal tender. Just think, the civilization whose currency is now kept in reserve vaults of central banks once had an early economy that also rested on shells, fish, corn, and tobacco. But monetary experimentation also had its limits. Corn could not work everywhere. Cod fish could not be measured in every deal. And the biggest problem with tobacco was that its quality declined, it could spoil, and its value did not remain stable. That means money is not just any object. Money is that thing on which society collectively places trust. At that time, the colonies did not have that trust. And that very point later became the biggest lesson of American monetary thinking. If you want power, you need not just an army, but also a reliable money system. Then came the pressure of British rule. After the French and Indian War, Britain adopted a policy of greater control and greater revenue extraction over the colonies. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and other tax measures deeply strengthened the feeling among the colonists that money was being taken from them, but representation was not being given. No taxation without representation was not just a slogan, it was a fight for economic dignity. And many times in history, political revolutions begin with economic questions. The fire of America's independence was also ignited to a large extent by questions of tax, trade, and control. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence came, but declaring independence was easy. Sustaining it was difficult. The war was long expensive, and the newly emerging political authority did not have a strong source of revenue. In such a situation, the Continental Congress printed paper currency, which came to be known as Continentals. In one way, it was a mixture of desperation and innovation. But the problem was that confidence was weak, taxation capacity was limited, and too much paper was printed. The result was that the value of the Continentals collapsed badly. Out of that experience came a famous phrase, "Not worth a Continental." This was America's first great monetary lesson. Printing a currency is easy. Keeping it valuable is difficult. That is why after independence, America's biggest challenge was not just writing a constitution, but also building an economy of trust. In 1785, the United States officially adopted the dollar sign. Later, the entire decimal structure, that is, $1 equal to 100 cents, became the identity of the American currency system. This step looks technical, but from here America took a decisive step toward a uniform national money. Different colonies, different habits, different exchange practices. Leaving all of these behind and creating one national unit meant turning political unity into economic unity. Even then, the real journey of the dollar was not straightforward. In 19th century America, banking was patchy, state banks had influence, and different forms of paper money existed. But the Civil War once again brought the same question to the front. How would the government finance war? From 1861, the Treasury began issuing paper currency, and with the legal tender framework of 1862, the notes that emerged later came to be called greenbacks, because their reverse side was printed in green ink. This step was not just a way to finance war. It was a major turning point in strengthening federal monetary authority. The Civil War taught America that currency and state capacity cannot be separated from each other. Now the story becomes even more interesting from here. On one side, America was building institutions within itself. Treasury, banking rules, federal power, later the Federal Reserve. And on the other side, its industrial capacity was growing. Then came the 20th century, 2 world wars arrived, and Europe's old powers kept weakening. After World War II, a new architecture of global order was built, and America stood at center stage. Under the Bretton Woods system, the dollar was linked to gold, and many other currencies were linked to the dollar. In other words, America stood in the middle of the world's monetary system. This was not just an economic arrangement, it was a geopolitical architecture. But in 1971, Richard Nixon suspended gold convertibility. The old Bretton Woods structure began to break, and the world moved toward floating exchange rates. A simple way of thinking might have said that now the dollar would weaken, because its direct gold backing had ended. But the opposite happened. America did not allow the system to collapse. It redesigned the system to suit itself. That was the moment from which the new chapter of modern dollar power began. Fiat money. But unmatched trust. No gold backing, but the backing of military power, finance, markets, and institutions. Then came the oil shock of the 1970s, and from here the power of the petrodollar came fully into the open. Put simply, the world's most important commodity trade, oil, began to happen mainly in dollars. According to the Atlantic Council, the petrodollar can broadly be understood in the form that Saudi oil revenues kept flowing back into US treasuries and the dollar system. After 1974, the US-Saudi security relationship and the oil-dollar linkage gave new strength to dollar demand. Now every country needed oil, and to buy oil, it needed dollars. That meant whether a country was America's friend, rival, small or large. On the road to energy security, it had to pass through the dollar system. This is where America's real magic was built. Other countries kept producing goods, kept buying oil, kept building reserves, and America's treasury market became the safest parking place in the world. Petrodollar recycling gave the US a cheap borrowing environment, gave Wall Street depth, and kept global finance dollar-centric. That is why the dollar stopped being just a note. It became the invoice currency, the reserve currency, the payment currency, and also the safe haven in times of crisis. The Atlantic Council's Dollar Dominance Monitor clearly says that the dollar is still dominant in reserve holdings, trade invoicing, and international transactions. According to IMF's Q4 2025 data, the US dollar's share in world foreign exchange reserves was 57%, while the Chinese renminbi share was only 2%. This difference shows that de-dollarization looks faster in headlines than it does in ground reality. Now you can understand why a leader like Trump can repeatedly use tariffs, sanctions, and pressure politics. Because behind him stands not just Washington, but the entire plumbing of the global dollar system. If a large part of the world trades in dollars, if banks need dollar clearing, if investors see US treasuries as safe assets, if people run toward American assets in times of crisis, then America gets a kind of leverage that no other country has in that quantity. So many times Trump's arbitrariness is actually the use of a system that America has shaped over decades in its own interest. Yes, one dramatic part of this story is often told with examples like Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, and others, that those who challenged the dollar had to pay a heavy price. But here, one honest distinction is necessary. It is easy to say that a certain leader challenged the dollar and therefore was attacked, but geopolitics is not that simple. In the cases of Iraq, Libya, or Venezuela, regime change, regional security, oil politics, sanctions, internal instability, and great power rivalry all work together. So the truth of the story is this: the relationship between challenging the dollar and geopolitical conflict has certainly been widely discussed, but giving a single cause explanation in every case would be an oversimplification. Even so, it is true that countries that try to move out of the dollar system face more financial friction, sanctions risk, and strategic pressure. Now the question is, will this dominance continue forever? The picture is changing, but slowly. After sanctions, Russia has increased the use of alternative payment arrangements, the yuan, and non-Western routes. Iran has been working on non-dollar pathways for a long time. China's CIPS network is also growing. According to official CIPS data, by the end of 2025, the number of direct and indirect participants had spread significantly, and its network had reached many countries around the world. This does not mean the dollar will fall tomorrow. It only means that the world is now building backup systems. But building a backup system and becoming the world leader are two different things. The strength of the dollar is not only in oil pricing. Its strength lies in the depth of the US bond market. the credibility of the Federal Reserve, the American legal system, the liquidity of the capital markets, and in the perception that even in times of crisis, the safest door is still America. That is why, however loudly de-dollarization is discussed, the IMF reserve data and the behavior of global finance do not yet show the same speed. People are looking for alternatives, but the anchors are still tied to that same old ship. And this is exactly where Trump's story connects to the dollar story. Trump creates headlines with his personality, but his real strength does not come from his temperament. It comes from that American system which gives him extraordinary leverage. When the White House talks about tariffs, by calling the trade deficit a national emergency, when sanctions become a foreign policy tool, when oil routes and payment channels become part of geopolitics, then it becomes clear that in the 21st century, power is not just about tanks and bombs, but also about payments and pricing. For many countries in the world, clashing with America means not only diplomatic risk, but economic risk too. And that economic risk cannot be understood without the dollar. So is America the world's boss only because it has the biggest military? No. Is it only because it has technology? No. The real point is that it linked military power, the financial system, oil trade, reserve currency status, and political influence into one single framework. Trump may be the loudest face of that framework, but the building was constructed long before him. From the insecurity of Jamestown to the helplessness of continental currency, from the compulsion of greenbacks to the engineering of Bretton Woods, from the Nixon shock to the petrodollar, and now from tariff politics to reserve dominance. This entire journey shows that America ruled the world not only through force but through trust, networks, and money architecture. But the story does not end here. Because the biggest truth of history is that no system is permanent. Once British coins ruled, then the dollar pushed them aside. Today, the dollar sits at the top, but the pressures are growing too. Geopolitical fragmentation, sanctions fatigue, local currency trade, China's ambition, and strategic hedging. The throne still belongs to America for now, but the real question is not who the king is today. The real question is whether the world is preparing, for the first time, for a system in which there will not be just one king. And if that happens, then bigger than Trump's arbitrariness will be the news that the world's monetary map itself has begun to change. That day will truly rewrite the script of global politics. If this video has taught you something new, or if you feel this information should reach more people, don't forget to like and share the video. Your small share can become valuable and useful information for someone else. If you have any questions related to this topic, or if you would like to share your opinion with us, be sure to write in the comment box. We read every question and suggestion from you, because your feedback inspires us to create better content. And if you want to keep receiving such interesting and reliable information about business, the economy, and the world in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel GRT Business and also press the bell icon so that you get notifications of every new video directly. At GRT Business, we always strive to provide you with accurate, balanced, and reliable information. Our news and analysis are prepared based on information obtained from various news agencies, public sources, and public opinion. We make every effort to verify and validate each fact as much as possible. But in case of any possible error or dispute, the responsibility lies with the respective sources. Our only aim is to present you with a correct and trustworthy perspective so that you can understand any topic better.